Welcome to Shahnameh, Book of Kings. Today we continue with the Trials of Rostam, as we begin with Afrasyab renewing the war. News spread throughout the world that the king of Iran was in captivity. Many claimants to the crown appeared. Among them was Afrasyab, who roused himself from his life of eating and sleeping and taking his ease, and once again attacked Iran. The war lasted for 3 months, at the end of which the Iranian army was routed. Many men, women, and children were enslaved, and the remaining Persians were gripped by despair. A number of refugees made their way to Zabalestan, where they entreated Dastan's son, Rostam, to save the country, saying, "You are our refuge, our last hope, our one protection now that King Kavus is gone. Alas, Iran will be destroyed, a lair for leopards and wild lions will flourish there. Our land will be a wasted battleground, where evil kings will triumph and be crowned." Rostam wept at their words, and his heart was filled with pain and sorrow. He answered them, "I and my army shall prepare for war, and I shall rid the land of Iran of these Turkish invaders." Rostam sent messengers to the king of Hamaviran and secretly to Kavus. To the former he said, "You tricked the king of Iran and went back on your oath. To stoop to such ruses is not the way of chivalry. Either you release King Kavus or prepare to do battle with me." But the king of Hamaviran answered, "King Kavus will never descend to the plains again, and if you come to Barbary, your welcome will be swords and heavy maces. The chains and prisons that hold him await you too. I and my army shall confront you. This is how we deal with invaders." In response, Rostam gathered an army together and took it over sea and dry land to the borders of Hamaviran. There he set about plundering the countryside, and all the land ran with rivers of blood. News reached the king of Hamaviran that Rostam had saddled Raksh and was laying his land waste, and that this was no time to delay. He led his army out from the city to confront the Persians, and the bright dark day was darkened by their dust. But seeing Rostam's massive weight and height, and the great mace he carried on his shoulder, the king's troops' hearts failed within them, and they fled back towards the city. The king sat with his counselors and asked for 2 young men to go as couriers to Egypt and Barbary. The letters they bore said that the 3 countries were close and had always shared in joy and misfortune, and that if they come now to the aid of Hamaviran, there was nothing to fear from Rostam, but that if they did not, Rostam would eventually bring disaster on their head too. When they learned that Rostam's army was nearby, their hearts quaked with fear. But they mustered troops and set out for Hamaviran. So great was their number that there was not a space on the plain where they were drawn up for an ant to walk. Seeing their forces, Rostam secretly sent a message to Kavus. "The kings of 3 countries have risen against me, and if I fight their forces, they will be routed in such utter confusion that they will not know their heads from their feet. But this war must not have bad consequences for you, and from such evil men we must expect an evil response. The throne of Barbary is nothing to me. If it's captured, means harm to my king." The courier heard the message and took it by hidden ways to Kavus, who answered, "Do not concern yourself about me. It was not for me that this world was created, and thus the heavens have ever turned, mingling poison with sweet draughts and war with peace. The world's creator is my support, and his greatness and benevolence are my refuge. Give Raksh his head, and do not leave a single one of our enemies alive in the open or in hiding." When Rostam heard this message, he prepared for battle. The next day the armies were drawn up in battle order. On the side of Hamaviran there was 100 war elephants. Behind them were countless jostling banners, red, yellow, and purple, and the army stretched for 2 miles. When Rostam saw their lines, he said to his men, "You see their mounts, necks, and manes, but keep your eyes on the points of their lances. They are 100,000, and we are but 100 horsemen. It is not greater numbers that will win this battle." Spears and arrows glittered in the air. The earth swarmed with blood like wine. So many lances thronged the sky it seemed a bed of close-packed reeds, and abandoned armor and severed heads, still helmeted. They lay scattered on the ground. Rostam urged Raksh forward, but avoided combat with lesser men. Instead, he rode after the Arab king and flung his lariat. Catching the king by the waist, he jerked him down from the saddle with the violence of a polo mallet, striking the ball. And Farhad bound his arms. 60 of the king's noblemen were taken prisoner, and the king of Barbary was also captured, among with 40 of his warriors. The king of Hammavaran was defeated, and promised to hand over Kvass and his noblemen to Rostam. Kvass, along with Giv, Gudars, and Tus, was released from his fortress prison, and Rostam delivered to the Persian treasury the arms of 3 countries, the treasury of 3 kings, their pavilions, hosts, crowns, and thrones, and whatever other thing of value he saw. Then Kvass had brought before him a gold Carapasan palfrey, on which was a golden litter. The frame was of aloe wood studded with jewels, and its couch was of a roomy brocade, worked with turquoise and rubies on a jet-black ground. He had Sudabé sit within the litter, and when she took her place there, he saluted her sun-like splendor. He led his army out of the city to their camp, and augmented by the forces of Egypt, Barbary, and Hammavaran, the number of forces now exceeded 300,000. When Rostam had informed the king of Afrasyab's new incursion into Iran, Kvass sent the Turanian leader a letter. Leave the land of Iran. Repent of your overreaching pride. I hear nothing but talk of you and your depredations. Tehran is your homeland, and you rejoice in its wealth, but blindly you turn always to evil. You want for nothing. Do then not strive for excess. Such longings will bring you only pain and endless sorrow. Accept your subordinate status, and so save your skin. You know well enough that Iran is in my land, and that the world trembles before my might. No matter how brave a leopard may be, it dare not confront the lion's claws. With this message reached Afrasyab, his mind was filled with hatred, his heart with rage. He sent his answer. Such idle talk can only come from one who is so low-minded. If Iran is your country, as you claim, why did you long to conquer Mazandaran? Hear then the truth. Iran is mine for 2 reasons. First, that I am descended from the son of Feridun, and second, that I have overcome its inhabitants by force of my sword. My sword will lop the summits from the mountains and bring down eagles from the dark skies. My banners are unfurled, and I have come prepared for war. Hearing his answer, Kvass put his vast army on a war footing, and led them from Barbary into Syria. For his part, Afrasyab marched forward, and his army clouded the heavens with their dust. The world was deafened by the blare of trumpets and the din of drums. The land was overspread with iron armor. The air was blackened by thick dust. And the shock of battle, Afrasyab's fortunes declined. 2 sections of the army of Tehran were slain, and when he saw this, Afrasyab's mind churned like fermenting wine that bubbles without fire beneath it. He cried out, "O my brave warriors, best of my troops, lions of Tehran, it is for such a day that I have trained and nourished you. Throw your hearts into the battle and drive away Kavus with lances and swords. Fall on the Iranian troops. Capture the lion-hearted Rostam, noose his head, and haul him from his mount. I shall give my own daughter to whoever subdues Rostam. I shall exalt his glory higher than the moon's sphere." When they heard him, the Turanians attacked with renewed force, but all their efforts were in vain, and Afrasyab fell back before Tehran, heartsick, and with 2 parts of his army destroyed. Seeking sweetness and pleasure from the world, he found only bitter poison. For his part, Kvass returned in triumph to Pars. He reigned in splendor, giving himself up to the pleasures of court life. He sent out great warriors, wise and just men, to confirm his rule in his possessions. In Merv and Naurashirpur and Balkh and the Herat, the world was filled with justice, and the wolf turned harmlessly from the lamb. On Rostam, Kvass bestowed the title of champion of the world. Then one morning the devil, Iblis, addressed a convocation of demons, a secret and unbeknownst to the king. "Under this king our lives are miserable and wretched. I need a nimble demon, one who knows court etiquette, who can deceive the king and wrench his mind away from God and bring his royal glory down into the dust. In this way the burdens he has placed upon us will be lightened." The demons heard him, but none at first responded out of fear of Kvass. Then an ugly demon spoke up. "I'm wily enough for this." And so saying, he transformed himself into a handsome, eloquent youth, one who would be grace in any court. It happened that the king went out hunting, and the youth saw his opportunity. He came forward and kissed the ground, handing Kvass a bouquet of wild flowers. He said, "Your royal far is of such splendor that the heavens themselves should be your throne. The surface of the earth is yours to command. You are the shepherd, and the world's nobles are the flock. There is but one thing remaining to you, and when this is accomplished, your glory will never fade. The sun still keeps its secrets from you, how it turns into the heavens, and who it is that controls the journeys of the moon and the succession of night and day. These are as yet known to you." The king's mind was led astray by this demon's talk, and his mind forsook the ways of wisdom. He did not know that the heavens are immeasurable, and that the stars are many, but that God is one, and that all are powerless beneath his law. The king was troubled in his mind, wondering how he could fly into the heavens without wings. He asked learned men how far it was from the earth to the heavens. He consulted astronomers and set his mind on foolish enterprise. He gave orders that men were to go at night and rob eagles' nests of their young. These squab were to be placed in houses in pairs and reared on fowl and occasional lamb's meat. When the eagles had grown as strong as lions and were able to subdue a mountain goat, Kvass had a throne constructed of aloes wood and gold, and at each corner he had a lance attached. From the lance he suspended lamb's meat. Next, he bound 4 eagles tightly to the structure. Then King Kvass sat on the throne, his mind deceived by the wiles of Ahriman. When the eagles grew hungry, they flew up toward the suspended meat, and the throne was lifted above the ground, rising up from the level plain into the clouds. The eagles strained towards the meat to the utmost of their capacity. I have heard that Kvass was carried into the heavens as far as the sphere of the angels. Others say that he fought with his arrows against the sky itself, but God alone knows if these and other stories are true. The eagles flew for a great while, but finally their strength gave out and their wings began to tire, and they tumbled down from the dark clouds, and the king's throne plummeted toward the ground. It finally came to rest near Amal, and miraculously the king was not killed. Hungry and humiliated, Kvass was filled with regret at his foolishness, and he waited forlornly in the thicket, praying to God for help. While he was begging forgiveness for his sins, the army was searching for some trace of him. Rostam, Giv, and Tas received news of his whereabouts and set off with a band of soldiers to rescue him. Gudar said to Rostam, "Since I was weaned of mother's milk, I've known the ways of kings and served the royal throne. I've seen the world's great monarchs and their glories, but never have I heard so mad a story as this we hear now of Kvass the fool, who's so unwise he's hardly fit to rule." The heroes reached Kvass and furiously reproached him. Gudar said, "A hospital is where you need to be. Forget your palaces and sovereignty. You throw away your power. You don't discuss your plans and foolish fantasies with us. 3 times disaster struck you down, but still you haven't learned to curb your headstrong will. First, you attacked Mazandaran, and then captivity reduced you to despair. Then, trusting to your enemies, you gave your heart away, and so became their slave. And now, your latest folly is to try your strength against the ever-turning sky." Shamefaced and humble, Kvass replied, "All that you say is true and just." He was placed in a litter, and on his journey home, humiliation and regret were his companions. When he reached his palace again, his heart remained wrung with sorrow, and for 40 days he waited as a supplicant before God. His head bowed in the dust, his pride was humbled, and shame kept him locked within his palace, weeping and praying. He neither granted audience nor feasted, but in sorrow and regret had wealth distributed to the poor. But when Kvass had wept in this way for a while, God forgave him. King Kvass reestablished justice in the world, and it shone equally on nobles and commoners alike. Justice made the world as rich and splendid as a fine brocade, and over all the king presided, majestic and magnificence. And here's where our tale ends for today. But I'll be back tomorrow with more, many more. Until then, my friend,